EMP Series, Day 160. Carl woke to the smell of fresh coffee. It was 4:30 a.m. Leonard was just cracking a couple eggs onto the stovetop. "Hungry?" he asked Carl. "I gotta get rolling," Carl responded. "Would love a cup of that coffee, though, if you could spare it." Leonard poured him a large cup and handed it to him. He tossed the eggs a couple times and scooped them onto a plate. He handed it to Carl as well, and he said, "Might as well eat. It won't take up any more time than you need to drink that coffee." Carl smiled. "Thanks," he said. Carl started eating his eggs as Leonard slid a couple biscuits onto his plate as well. "It's a long ride, brother," he told Carl. Carl nodded and kept eating. Carl asked where Frank was. Leonard told him that he left at 3 a.m. to go check on Carl's house. "If you run into him in the woods on the way back, try not to shoot him," Leonard joked. Carl chuckled. "I'll try," he said. He finished up his breakfast and loaded up his gear onto his horse and headed back down the mountain. In town, Jimmy Abbott just had another miserable night, sleeping in the alley. He was completely out of food and pretty hungry. He made his way over toward the railroad workers' camp and got in the food line. A few minutes later, he felt a firm hand jerk on his shoulder. "Hey, boy, you belong here?" a large, surly man asked him. "I ain't seen you before, and I know everyone on my crew." Jimmy stumbled for words for a brief moment, and then figured he may as well just tell him the truth. What did he have to lose at this point? He was already busted. "I have nowhere to go, mister. I spent 2 miserable nights sleeping in that alley over there, and I'm starving. I'm sorry, mister, but if you let me eat, I'd appreciate it." "Oh, you can eat, son, but you're going to have to work for it. Hard work. In exchange, you get 3 meals a day and a place to sleep. Top it all off with 3 ounces of silver a week. You're hired," he shouted. Jimmy Abbott thought about protesting, but in fact it was a pretty good offer. "Okay," he said. The large man told him to eat all he wanted. He said, "If you aren't in the line of men over there by the platform in half an hour, ready to walk up the line with the next work detail, don't ever let me catch you round here again, or I promise you'll be sorry, son." "Yes, sir," Jimmy said. "I'll be there." The man nodded for Jimmy to go ahead and eat. Just like that, he had a career with the railroad. It was Pastor Sharp's day to spend with Ish, and Dalton had the truck loaded, and he was ready to go. He was anxious to see Hira. Greg jokingly yelled down to Pastor as he was walking down toward the truck. "Hey, Pastor, can you take Steve instead today? I need Dalton for something else." Dalton's jaw dropped. Pastor yelled back, "Oh, stop it, the poor kid." Greg laughed. Dalton grimaced and blushed. Both men got in the truck and off they went. It was a long, bumpy ride to the Patel homestead. By the time they arrived, Pastor needed to stretch. Hira ran out to greet them and said, "Pastor Ish is in his study, sir." Pastor smiled and nodded and walked into the house. Hira threw her arms around Dalton, and the two embraced. Dalton was as nervous as a schoolboy today. He'd been seeing Hira for a few months, and the two had fallen in love. Greg, who had become like a father to Dalton, had shared with him his concern that his relationship with Hira was a distraction, that it was compromising his ability to provide security for Pastor during their visits to the Patel farm. He cautioned Dalton that, while things had been relatively quiet lately, They could not let their guards down for a minute. Anything could happen at any time, he warned. Dalton, puzzled, looked at Greg. Was he telling him to break off his relationship with Hira? No, assured Greg. I just think you need to make other arrangements to get together with her. I want to assign someone else to the security for their meetings. This was to be the last time Dalton would accompany Pastor as his security detail during these visits. He laid out the lunch that Hira had prepared for them on the picnic table under a large maple tree near the barn. Dalton had made a big decision, probably the biggest of his life so far. He'd prayed about it, and he was completely at peace with it. He knew that it was what God wanted for him. Inside, Pastor and Ish were in the study discussing their agenda for the upcoming board meeting. They heard a loud scream coming from outside. They ran out the door, Pastor holding a shotgun, with Ish, who was carrying his Mini 14. Shima also ran out behind them. They stopped on the front steps and saw Dalton hugging Hira. Dalton looked at them and smiled and said, "She said yes." Hira shrieked, "We're getting married." "Praise God," Pastor said to Ish and Shima. Shima ran over and embraced Hira. She showed her the ring Dalton had just given her. "It's beautiful," she said. Hammer and his partner, Little Bear as he was called, camped in the woods outside town. Hammer got a lead on Roger at the bar yesterday. The bartender remembered him from his first visit there, when he convinced them to buy their booze from the MC. He told Hammer he remembered seeing him days later, talking to a young lady on the train platform. He didn't know who she was. He had only seen her a few times in town. He gave Hammer a description that wasn't much help, except for the fact that she had a small child with her. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Hammer thanked him and left. Up at the Hobbs homestead, Buddy got up from the table in the kitchen, which was adjacent to the living room where the prisoners were being held. He walked into the bathroom and closed the door. Tyler looked out the window at the man sitting guard on the porch. He looked over at Les, who was tied up next to Samantha. He showed him that he managed to work the duct tape free from his hands. He quickly unwound the tape that bound his ankles to the chair. He nodded at the hallway leading out of the kitchen and bathroom beyond. When he freed himself, he stood up quietly and started to walk over toward Les. When he heard the bathroom door open, he made eye contact for a brief second with Buddy Tanner. Buddy immediately reached for his rifle, which was propped up against the wall by the bathroom door. Tyler turned and ran out the door on the other end of the room and into the dining room. Buddy fired 2 shots in quick succession at Tyler, but missed as he ran out. Tyler then launched himself through a window, shattered glass flying everywhere. He ran as fast as he could out into the backyard. As Buddy started to proceed through the living room, Les tipped himself over in the chair that he was tied up in and blocked Buddy's path. Buddy tripped and tumbled to the floor, rolling over and jumping back up onto his feet immediately. By the time he got to the window, Tyler was running into the woods, almost at the tree line. Buddy fired 4 more shots, 2 two-round bursts. He narrowly missed Tyler with the 3rd and 4th shots as he disappeared into the trees. When he ran back into the living room, the guard on the porch was inside the house. He had knocked Les unconscious with his rifle. Buddy told him to secure the prisoners and he ran out into the woods after Tyler. Tyler had prepared for a number of scenarios. He stashed a mountain bike in the woods previously in case of just such a situation. He grew up riding dirt bikes in these woods and had established an extensive trail network. By the time Buddy Tanner got to the spot where Tyler had the bike stashed, he was pedaling as fast as he could, already about a half a mile downhill, on a trail that wound its way throughout the mountains. He was gone. Buddy stood silently, trying to listen for any sound or indication to what way Tyler went. There was none. Tyler rode the mountain bike down a trail which crossed a long gravel driveway that led back up to his house. In the woods just before the intersection of the driveway and the road, Tyler had a 50-gallon barrel buried with the top about a foot below grade. He quickly and frantically dug with his hands to uncover the barrel top. He opened the lid and pulled out an AR-15 rifle and an ammo can that held .223 rounds and a rucksack with clothing and gear. He also pulled out a tree saw, which he had stashed in the barrel as well. He walked over to a very large oak tree. He moved his hand along the base until he found the spot that had a cut in it. The Sons of Liberty had previously cut 3/4 of the way through the large tree. Tyler took the saw and inserted it into the cut and sawed the rest of the way through the tree, dropping it across the gravel driveway leading up the hill to his house. He knew this would slow down the return of Buddy's men and the van. It was at least a couple hours' walk up the driveway to the house. He had to think. He could lie in wait here and attempt to take out Buddy's 2 men when they reached the downed tree. Or he could continue to put distance between himself and Buddy Tanner. He opted for the latter. He knew that when Buddy's men reached the downed tree that they would be cautious. Taking them both out while they were on alert was possible, but had at least a dozen ways of potentially going wrong. No, he decided. He would instead go and regroup and more likely live to fight another day. He got back on the bike and continued down the trail. He headed toward town along the trail adjacent to the tracks, careful not to be seen by anyone. He stashed his bike behind the old mill and walked in the cover of the trees toward the platform. He would try to find Jimmy Abbott. Jimmy was just finishing up for the day on his work detail. He was in line to get supper when Tyler spotted him. Tyler looked around for Buddy's men, but did not see them anywhere. He slowly and cautiously approached the camp and Tyler. When Jimmy saw Tyler, Tyler motioned for him to come to the edge of the camp, and they met at the fence. Tyler told Jimmy that he was going to set up camp out by the river, at the base of the dam. Jimmy knew the spot he was talking about and made plans to meet up with him there. He said he would try to get some food from the camp. Tyler cautioned him not to let anyone see him leave town. He reminded him to double back several times to cover his trail to make sure he wasn't being followed. That night, they made a small fire, and as Tyler ate the can of beans that Jimmy had smuggled from camp, he filled him in on all that had happened. As they tried to anticipate Buddy's next move, Tyler was pretty sure they wouldn't vacate the farm. He knew that Buddy knew that Tyler and his men were the ones that killed the soldiers at the train last week. Because of that, Buddy also knew that Tyler could not go to the authorities about them taking over the farm. No, Tyler reasoned, they weren't going anywhere. We need to recruit some more men. If we have any hope of retaking the farm, he told Jimmy. Jimmy told him that he had ran into an old friend from high school while on work detail today. He was working for the railroad with his brothers. The three had never been too fond of hard work, and they were pretty disgruntled. "Do they have guns?" Tyler asked. "No," replied Jimmy. "The major doesn't allow any weapons in the camp." Approaching them would be risky, Tyler thought. But he didn't have many other options. He needed to take back the farm, or he himself would be nothing more than a refugee. He had the rifle that he had dug up from the cache by the downed tree. They had another cache buried in back of the barn. Getting it would not be as easy, with Buddy and his men on watch at the farm. But first and foremost, he needed men. "Let's go into town," Tyler said. "Tell those boys you want to buy them a drink down at that bar. I'll meet you all down there." Buddy Tanner had different plans. He figured somehow, some way, Tyler would bring a fight back to him. He wanted no part of it. He was confident that they could beat anything or anyone that Tyler Hobbs could come up with, but he didn't want the trouble that it would cause. He was focused on his mission, finding Roger. He assembled his men and told them, "We move out in the morning." Hammer asked where they would be going. Buddy told him, "We just can't stay here any longer. This isn't the fight we came for." First thing in the morning, Hammer and Little Bear split up and go separately into town. Go to the railroad camp and apply for work. While you're there, keep your eyes and ears open for anything useful. Don't talk to each other or let on that you know each other, except as it relates to your job. You know the drill. Lee, set up in the woods overlooking the platform. Get a good spot where you can see everything that happens there. Either of you two guys learn anything useful, get word to Lee. He looked at his men. Standard drill, guys. None of us know each other. If we run into one another anywhere near town, I'll find you if I need to. We split up at 0600. One man on watch, 3-hour shifts. I'll take first. Get some rest. Then Lee spoke up. Yeah, you girls better get some good rest. Y'all are going to be working real hard on that line tomorrow. He chuckled. Buddy smiled. Hammer and Little Bear grimaced.